What's up, you freaking nerds? Welcome to my 2025 downhill bike shootout presented by Outdoor Research with support from Sweet Protection and Windrock Bike Park. I'm here with my boy, Nick Doman. What are we working with here?
This is the Crestline RS 205 VHP. Has a carbon fiber frame, mixed wheels, and a dual link suspension system.
This is some straight up unobtainium. I don't think you can even buy these things anymore, but we know of a guy who goes pretty fast on one around here. We've been lucky enough to put it through its paces here at Windrock, and we'll send it back to the shop where we'll dive into this thing. All right, we just finished up our last day of riding at Windrock on the Crestline. This is actually James McAllister's bike. He's the mechanic for Aaron, and we broke it.
A couple times.
Yeah, so
Sorry, James.
Sorry, James, but that meant we didn't get the most time on this bike. I rode it enough to talk about it.
I can talk about it.
Yeah, you did. You rode it from the top.
I did the enduro run on this thing.
Yeah, yeah, just being up front, but pretty sick looking bike. The silhouette's mean. It's running on a dual counter rotating link suspension design. Maybe call it VPP.
Yeah, rather close to VPP. Almost identical.
This is our only Öhlins bike. Yeah, and previously we both had the chance to ride the Crestline e-bike. Kind of rides like a souped up Crestline e-bike.
Very much so.
If I had to say so. This frame comes in one size. In the middle headset position, it's a 480 mil reach with a 445 mil rear end. It came with a extendo cup. I rode it one day with the extendo cup, which put the reach out to 490. James was kind enough to put a neutral headset in with a 45 mil stem that kind of lined up with the rest of our bikes. And I would say the standout feature of this frame to me, especially when compared to the characteristic of the Crestline e-bike, is the stiffness of the frame and the directness of the feel. To me, the rear end was quite stiff. It felt like a race bike, and that came with positives and negatives.
Coming from riding the Crestline e-bike, has a lot of the same traits, but then I would say that there were aspects of the e-bike that are not in this bike, which for its given purpose makes a lot of sense. That Crestline e-bike did have a lot of, I guess, flex in the rear end. It would wiggle for sure, and this does not. It's
on the other end of the spectrum. This feels like one of the stiffest bikes we had on the test.
And then, albeit that, the suspension on this, so one thing is James is bigger and taller than me, so the suspension is sprung for him, not me. However, despite this bike being what I would consider oversprung, it was actually quite rideable, which is something that will come up with another bike on the test. Even with the long headset, I felt like I could ride the bike all right. It wants to go fast. It carries a ton of speed. It has, I'd say, a good amount of hold up in the suspension and a lot of platform to press off. At the same time, it does eat bumps pretty well.
Yeah, I think it would be hard to talk about the suspension without talking about the Öhlins package and the direction James has set up this bike with. The fast rebound, high damping idea is embodied in this bike. I don't know where exactly the compression tunes sit in the grand scheme of things, but they are quite stiff, especially on the shock. The rebound tune is super fast. It works. It does work. It makes it a handful at times, but the way this bike carries speed just over on really any section of trail is pretty impressive. And I think that's mainly due to a suspension characteristic. So there's this fast rebound and stiff compression tune that's paired with what I feel like is a very high leveraged suspension design. It feels very fluttery off the top. So pairing like a high leveraged, very fluttery beginning part of the travel with a fast rebound tune and a stiff compression means the wheel kind of wants to get out of the way, but there's also a platform, and then it recovers super quickly and gives the bike more support. So the bike is just recovering super quickly, which means it stays high in the travel, and however that is manifesting itself on this bike, it means it carries a shit ton of speed. And I think that's mainly due to a suspension character.
I mean, the way I could think about that based on what Brian is describing is because the rebound is so fast, it's almost like the bike is propelling itself with the shock. As it's rebounding, it's pressing back into the terrain and creates it. It kind of does feel that way. Like it's almost propelling itself down the trail by hitting bumps, which is that's at least what I felt. Like I rode it on a pretty chunky, nastier enduro track, not just the downhill track. And as long as I wasn't, I mean, this sounds stupid, as long as I wasn't breaking into stuff, it just really, the wheel will get out of the way and it recovers and kind of presses you on. You definitely have to stay strong on the center of the bike. And if it could get away from you for sure, and especially once for me, because it's heavier sprung than what would be ideal for me, I just had to be very careful and conscious of what I was doing.
Yeah, it was to the point where I felt apprehensive on the jumps. And I think moving the headset into the neutral position made it more rideable because I was getting into the situation where I could not get far enough back on the bike. And the situation that kept playing in my mind was it boings me and I cannot compensate and I'm along for the ride.
Yeah.
And I straight up didn't hit some jumps because of that. Or I was very cautious. And then it was much more rideable in the neutral headset position because I feel like my body weight was in a better place to compensate for this suspension characteristic. But you absolutely had to kind of be on top of it.
For sure.
Especially on flat pedals, I wonder if riding it clipped in is a better solution to manage that suspension characteristic. The bike feels a little more unsettled.
I mean, I would say another characteristic of the suspension, for me at least, was when it came to jumping, there's a couple more aggressive lips that are not small, they're pretty steep. I was not willing to like go full on into it because I don't think I have the strength to control that degree of rebound of suspension. I don't know. I just didn't want to find out.
Yeah. And before you guys say, why didn't you slow the rebound down? We slowed the rebound down. And it's the tune of the shock. It's a fast rebound tune.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to totally change the concept, the suspension concept of the bike, because I thought it actually worked quite well with James's settings. However, I would say the one thing I struggled with on this bike the most was its character under braking. I think that's something we want to kind of dive into with most of these bikes. The anti-rise on this feels low, which means it extends under braking. In the parking lot, punch the rear brake and you can see the shock extend. And that's the sensation I got in the steeps. And combined with the fast rebound tune, it just felt like the bike was overpowering the front and made it unsettled. From the bikes on test, I feel like this was the most extreme low anti-rise example that had that ride characteristic. And I think Nick and I have a slightly different preference here. For me, I struggle to get along with it. There's positives and negatives to that braking characteristic. What'd you feel about that?
Yeah, I mean, personally, my e-bike, I think, does stand up under braking. So I'm used to that type of braking action. Like, I just don't think about it. I just kind of expect it. And I think that you could almost use that, I guess, suspension standing to unweight the bike in places. It becomes almost like a preload without doing anything. At least like on my e-bike, I think that's like where I've learned it. And also like, say, coming into a corner, you can like stomp the brakes early, unweight the bike, have it lift, and then load into the corner. So I think it's kind of how you use that braking action, where other bikes on the test absolutely just anchor in under braking. This, say it extends a little bit. I think that, there's pros and cons to it for sure. And like, it's not something that doesn't really bother me.
I think I struggle more with it. I like to be very concentrated on my brakes and be kind of more on and off. I think this braking characteristic is more forgiving to dragging brake in corners. It almost helps in some ways. You don't want to be, I'm not promoting dragging brakes in corners.
He's saying I'm slow and I drag brake all the time, which is not wrong.
But if you were to drag brake in a corner, it's more forgiving to do so on a lower anti-rise bike like this because the suspension stays a little bit more active and it actually plants the front. Yeah. But for me, when I'm in a steep section with lots of steps, just boinging the bike forward, and that is not a confidence-inspiring sensation for me personally. And I feel like I'm able to get more out of a bike that is at least neutral or settled under braking. So that comes with some trade-offs too. But for me, that was a standout characteristic. That was maybe my biggest struggle, honestly. I guess besides the stiffness.
Yeah.
And I guess to close the stiffness chapter, we weren't able to get a control wheel for this test. And this comes with E13 carbon rims, and a lot of the other bikes had DT Swiss. And given that this bike is a stiff chassis, I feel like the wheel choice kind of made that worse. And also, I felt like a lot of the feedback was coming through. The wheels just felt stiff. That's what I'm trying to say.
Long-winded way of saying the wheels feel pretty stiff. And I would agree, like on the enduro track that we rode, it was chattery, and there was definitely extra feedback that I felt like I was getting as a result of probably the rims, I'd imagine. There's always trade-offs to that, right? Like a stiffer wheel is very direct feeling. I feel like they roll really fast, they maintain their speed, but then obviously the trade-off is comfort.
Yeah. If we had more time with these bikes, I think it's an interesting topic of, does a stiff frame with compliant wheels make sense? Does a compliant frame with stiff wheels? I think you can complement the bike's build in one way or another. But if I were to go one direction on this for my riding, I would probably put some more compliant wheels on it. And there's a clip of me just barely kissed the landing with my front wheel. And it was like, bing. I think it's a visual representation of like, there just was not, whatever was going on there wasn't a lot of give. So overall, that just contributed to a bike that felt fast, very direct. You kind of had to be on top of it.
You very had to be on top of it.
Yeah.
Like this is not like a
this isn't a
rider.
Yeah, no.
It's not the lazy rider. It's a pure race bike. It's fast, and you have to be very attentive to what you're doing.
Yeah. I would say the balance was pretty good. I still probably would have preferred a longer dropout option, but this bike has a dropout system. I am a huge fan of this dropout system. If you design a bike with a dropout system like this, you don't have to hear us complain.
It's a very simple solution
about chainstay length anymore, because you can just make everyone happy. From a design perspective, engineer perspective, I don't know what the trade-offs are, but the fact that there's a few bikes out there that integrate this system very cleanly tells me it's at least a attainable solution, and in my eyes, it's a very good one. And I know Aaron Gwin runs a slightly longer dropout, depending on the track.
Yeah.
So
he knows a thing or two about going fast.
So that's it's a valuable adjustment to have. So I think that's about it. Would have loved to get more time on it, but yeah, we're hacks. So I'll leave Nick out of this. I'm a hack. So yeah, thanks James for lending his personal bike. Huge help. Also, thanks Outdoor Research for sponsoring the project, as well as Sweet Protection, Windrock Bike Park, and Maxxis for providing our control tires. That's about it for this video, and we'll catch you guys in the next one.